Well, a few weeks ago, I was having a conversation with my daughter Eileen about a book that she's reading about India called Shantaram. I think the book is maybe 900 or 1,000 pages long, so it's not very likely that I'm going to pick this thing up. But it did get me thinking about books about India that made a big impression on me. And I decided to read the one that had the biggest, certainly the biggest impact on me of all, and that's a book called Freedom at Midnight by Larry Collins and Dominique LaPierre. And it concerns the events surrounding Britain leaving India and India gaining its independence. It covers a very brief period. It's from February 1947 when Clement Attlee named Louis Mountbatten to be the last viceroy of India and the first governor general of India after freedom, through August 15th, 1947, when India was finally cut loose, and then up to January 1948, when Gandhi was assassinated. In between, there are a number of really important events, incredible bloodshed, massacres, things like that. It's just an amazing, amazing story. Now, on the Indian side, the principal characters are, of course, Gandhi, who's certainly the hero of the whole thing. And he was absolutely opposed to the partition of India. He wanted immediate Indian freedom, but he didn't want it split up. Also on the Indian side, you have Nehru, who was a very close disciple of Gandhi's. A guy named Patel, who was Nehru's more or less partner in the Indian Congress Party. And the bad guy in the piece, from the standpoint of partition of India, was a man named Jinnah, a Muslim who absolutely, totally insisted on the partition of India. And of course, also on the Indian side is a guy named Nathuram Godse, who's the fellow who ultimately assassinated Gandhi. Now, on the English side, the main characters are, of course, include Louis Mountbatten, that final viceroy, who had to come up on the fly, so to speak, with the plan to take India apart and get Britain out of it. And a guy you never heard, I certainly didn't recall ever hearing of, a guy named Cyril Radcliffe. He was a London lawyer, never been to India before, knew nothing about the place. Mountbatten put him in a cottage with some maps and a bunch of population tables, and he was the guy who devised the plan to split Punjab in two, half being India and the other half Pakistan, and Bengal, with half being India and the other half becoming Bangladesh. And of course, that division, Punjab and Bengal, led to the biggest mass migrations in history, with massacres and murders and atrocities all along the way. Just an incredible, incredible story. When you read the book, there are a number of questions that go through your mind. Was there any other way to cut India loose than what they did with this partition? I don't know. I don't know if doing it Gandhi's way, namely just cut it loose and immediately, whether that would have produced less bloodshed than the partition that they ended up coming up with. I have no idea. It's well beyond me. You wonder, if you were a Brit at the time, you're saying, why did we have to own India in the first place? Surely we could have figured out another way to exploit the vast wealth that was on this subcontinent. But I don't know the ins and outs of owning empires or what politicians in the 19th century, when this thing really came together, were thinking about. Very hard to know. And then, you end up with a question about human beings. What is it in human nature that inspires millions of people to kill one another because of their religion? How And I mean, this was intense, intense religious feeling. And similarly, what is it in human nature that inspires millions of people to follow a guy like Gandhi? And once again, I don't know, but as you read this book, you can't help but think about these things. Now, in the almost 50 years since this has been published, I'm sure it's received plenty of scholarly criticism. All these history books get that. There've probably been plenty of other histories about this period that certainly I haven't read, and that may be better informed or may have been written from the Indian or the Muslim perspective. I don't know. I haven't read them. But I did read this one, and it made a heck of an impression on me. I really think it's worth picking up and reading. You may have read it one time in the past, but I think you're going to find it's absolutely as compelling today in the 21st century as it was when it first came out, like I say, almost 50 years ago. That's my recommendation this week. Freedom at Midnight by Larry Collins, Dominique LaPierre. A really remarkable story, a great book. I suggest you give it a try. See you next week.